it might apparently seem that AI is only, let's say, half a century ago, right? In the middle of the 20th century. From a computing perspective, that may be so, because before that, computers in their electronic form didn't exist. But the study itself is centuries old. It's almost over 2,000 years ago that studies and understanding, people started questioning to understand the brain. And as discussed elsewhere also, work on understanding happened more than 2,000 years ago using syllogisms and so forth. Modern computation, of course, started. Mechanical computers, they were developed almost 200 years ago. And we'll see if we can find some good pictures to show you the size and the workings. I've actually seen working of a mechanical calculator myself. They existed almost 40 years ago here in this country as well. In terms of precursors, I would like to mention a very famous name that comes from the word algorithm. You will keep hearing this word algorithm, algorithms, AI and algorithms and computation and so forth. The people who are familiar with the computer science, people, IT professionals, they've heard this name, algorithm. Where did this word come from? This came from a very famous Muslim scientist of Baghdad, whose name was Al-Khwarizmi. The word algorithm came from his name, Al-Khwarizmi, and he was the creator of these multiple recipes, the way we program things, algorithms, okay? So it is, whenever we mention computing, I think his name stands out. The other thing in terms of history, the watershed in the history of AI is the discovery of the artificial neuron, in fact, based on which we try to create the artificial neuron. So the conceptualization of the artificial neuron is a significant milestone in the history of artificial intelligence. And we can replicate the base unit of the brain. And this was discovered by two gentlemen, McLaughlin Pitts. That's all I would like to mention on that. By the way, I also like to take this opportunity to put before you the oldest, or the first computer, as it's called, the ENIAC, Electronic Numeric Integrator and Calculator, around 1945. And this was such a large machine, and there's a reason I'm actually mentioning a couple of things about that. Such a huge machine that it spread over a large number of rooms, and the technology in those days was so large that each room was built a number of tubes and bulbs and wires going from this end to the other, and then so forth. So humongous size that. And the most interesting thing is that machine, although it calculated every day, almost virtually, it used to create problems, and there were problems in it, and people had to go and find out and replace the pieces of equipment that were, based on which that computer was working. And in there, they also discovered that these connections, the cables connecting to each other, they came across physical bugs that used to disrupt the working of the machine. And lo and behold, understand this thing, that the word bugging and debugging actually is originated from that concept, where virtually every day the machine had to be repaired, it had to be cleaned, and the bugs, because there were so many of them, thousands of them, the cables connecting each other, that the bugs were there, and they had to debug the machine to actually run the computer. So that's where debugging came from. Anyway, another big name in artificial intelligence is that of Alan Turing, around the mid-1950s. And he came up with the idea, how can we devise a machine an intelligent machine. And he designed a simple experiment, amongst other things. If the person asking the questions to this device or machine sitting behind, let's say, a curtain, if the person asking the question and receiving the answers, if he is unable to distinguish whether these responses are coming from a device, a physical machine, or a human being, we could say that that machine has passed the Turing test and it is an intelligent machine. So Alan Turing and his theories and his evaluation still is talked about all across the AI community. So mid-50s, that followed by the way, the term artificial intelligence as a science was created in 1956 as a very famous called Dartmouth Conference. And by the way, this is just about the time when two computing languages, Lisp, L-I-S-P, List Processing, Lisp, and Fortran came about. Fortran stands for Formula Translation. So around the mid-1950s, okay, is when you could say the term AI was coined and the community was created. Early programs were trying to understand how people think, how they work, and so forth. A lot of work on general problem solving, trying to understand generalized things, game playing. By the way, one more time, game playing has a very large contribution and impact on our understanding of the human brain, how we think, how we react, and build intelligent machines accordingly. The other part, of course, work started on something called expert systems in the 70s and the 80s. Specialized knowledge areas and trying to replicate or copy a working of that. And they were very, very popular in the 70s and the 80s, and perhaps the 90s as well. After which, work on the neuron part, the artificial neural networks, that's picked up a lot of momentum, and it still does. And by this time, mid-80s, AI had become industry, and everybody wanted, to take part in that. And of course, neural networks. So once AI becomes industry, this means, there's a lot of money coming in, a lot of research areas, opportunities, and applications. And around the mid-1995s, the concept of intelligent agents, we'll come across that as we go along, looking at things, programs, humans as agents, which have some sensory inputs and a processing unit, and then an output. So intelligent agents is another important concept that has resulted in a lot of work going on in artificial intelligence. I think I'd like to take a break on this one. And so we've covered some basics and the birth of AI during the last, let's say, essentially 50 to 60, 70 years. I hope you find it interesting. Thank you very much.